Let's talk about why submaximal but frequent training is going to be key when it comes to you learning advanced calisthenics skills. Before we get into everything, we need to first make a distinction between two key elements. The first is going to be relative intensity. So this is basically how much force is your muscle actually producing for every repetition that you do. The second element is going to be your proximity to failure and the amount of fatigue that you're actually accumulating. This is going to be referring to the total volume you're doing, how many reps in reserve you have, etc. When we say submaximal but frequent, we are always referring to the second element, meaning that we don't want to just train to failure every single session, but rather take the volume that we do in one session and try to split it across multiple days. Just a simple arbitrary example. It's much better to do 15 sets of planche or front lever across the span of 3 to 4 days rather than trying to cram all 15 sets in one session. Before we jump into the next point, we need to talk about type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers. In broad terms, your type 1 muscle fibers are going to be smaller, produce less force, and more endurance-based, compared to the type 2 fibers, which are going to be your bigger, stronger, more aggressive muscle fibers that are going to be the main ones used in most of the skills that you do in calisthenics. And so our goal is to effectively recruit as many type 2 fibers as we can when it comes to performing these very high intensity calisthenics-based movements. In simple terms, the way that our body recruits muscle fibers is in a very linear fashion, starting with the smallest muscle fibers until the body has a reason to call up on the bigger, stronger fibers. Or in other words, the type 1 fibers are called on before the type 2 fibers. But as we just discussed, we want access to those type 2 fibers so that we can then utilize them in the skills that we're trying to perform. Now, type 2 fibers are only called upon in very intense and extreme cases. However, when we perform calisthenic skills, whether it be a planche, front lever, planche lean, these movements are intrinsically very intense. This amount of relative intensity gets the type 2 fibers to be called up instantly. So when we train these static skills, we don't necessarily need to train to failure or do very high amounts of volume to stimulate those type 2 fibers. And that is the exact reason why submaximal but frequent training works so well, because we are able to directly target the type 2 fibers without building up too much fatigue in the process, allowing for more frequent, repeated exposure. Just to sum everything up, the actual effort, the relative intensity when it comes to most of the skills that we're doing is already extremely high. So the large type 2 fibers are already being recruited. So all we're doing on most of our training days is stopping the set prior to when form breaks down a lot and fatigue starts to build up immensely. So basically, we get the benefit of stimulating the type 2 fibers and learning the actual coordination aspect of the movement while preventing an abundance of fatigue from building up, so that we can then repeat what we just did more and more frequently, getting more and more exposure to the exact movement we're trying to learn.